Hello, today is Monday, September 23rd, and welcome to episode 363 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI fellow Jessica Jones, and I'm joined today by NSI Deputy Executive Director Martha Miller and two of our favorite NSI senior fellows, Les Munson and Morgan Vigna. So today we were talking about a story that came out last week that's kind of been in the headlines for a few months and really shouldn't be surprising anyone. Last week, the FBI revealed that Iranian hackers sought to influence the upcoming presidential election. They tried to provide emails stolen from the Trump campaign to Democrats, specifically a few people connected to Biden's reelection campaign, so not the Harris's team. However, there's no evidence that anyone responded to the emails, and a spokeswoman for the Harris campaign said the emails look like a phishing attempt or spam. Iran also sought access to Democratic presidential campaign to the Democrats, but there's no indication that they were successful in that. Stories came out over the summer, if you were paying attention, from several media organizations, Google and Microsoft, again alleging bad behavior from Iranian-backed hackers. And in August, Meta blocked a small cluster of WhatsApp accounts linked to a group of hackers affiliated with the IRGC as well. So there's a lot of bad activity happening on the back. By Iran. This is not their first attempt to influence U.S. elections. In the 2020 election, American officials linked Iran to, and I quote, a multi-pronged covert influence campaign and intended to undercut former President Trump's reelection prospects. Sounds a little dire. So first, Morgan, I'm going to turn to you. The Harris campaign called this, pretty obvious phishing attempts or spam. What do we make of the actual operation and what Iran's trying to do? Are they going to be successful?
Jess, as you note, this is nothing new. We've seen Iran, as well as other state and non-state actors, attempt to influence U.S. elections, steal information, compromise electoral integrity. This has been going on for a number of election cycles now, and it's only going to get more sophisticated as time goes on. The FBI, CISA have a tall order, and they've been doing a pretty remarkable job thus far. As you note, Iran was unsuccessful. These were pretty obviously unsophisticated phishing attempts that no one was really buying. Iran is not necessarily the top tier when it comes to cyber professionals. Russia and China in particular are really the big kahunas. Russia's been doing this for a while. China's clearly very sophisticated when it comes to stealing U.S. technology and intellectual property. So this is something that I think Iran will probably get better at, and something we should keep an eye on. But you have, again, like other state actors like North Korea, you have non-state actors operating in Eastern Europe that really do pose a very they pose a very real threat to not only to U.S. elections, but to the private sector. So moving forward, I think the FBI and CISA and the White House will need to definitely request robust funding from Congress. They'll need to continue to work on strengthening U.S. election integrity. But again, I don't think we're going to stop seeing these attempts anytime soon.
Les, Morgan brings up Russia and the election. Are we surprised that we've seen Russia in the headlines? We saw some criminal indictments last week. Do we think they're a little busy with the conflict in Ukraine, that they're not as focused on this election? Do you think, perhaps they're trading some of their, best practices with Iran, which aren't really fulfilling those best practices, it seems, with these kind of more amateur attempts? What do you make of this?
I'm sure the Russians and the Iranians and the Chinese are all trying to mess around in our elections. I'm frankly not sure any of it actually matters. At the end of the day, we should be on guard. We should defend against it. We should be aware. None of it's really going to change anyone's mind. I think the more interesting thing to talk about is this administration and its Iran policy. The Biden administration has been totally open to a new nuclear deal with Iran. The Biden administration opposed sending offensive weapons to stop the Houthis, who are an Iranian-backed rebel group that we're now at war with in the Persian Gulf. The Biden administration was opposed to Israel blowing up Hezbollah's pagers. Hezbollah is an Iran-backed militia group. Also, notably, the Biden administration's chief Iran negotiator, Robert Malley, is under investigation by the FBI for security violations. He's also, according to some published reports, part of an Iran experts initiative as an influence campaign run by Iran. So you actually have an administration sympathetic to Iran in the context of certain things that may be getting played by the Iranians. And what is actually going on here? I think this is an interesting story, but I think it's part of a much larger story. And I'm being completely irresponsible, of course, by combining all of these things together and talking about the way this administration treats Iran here, just 6 weeks before our election is over. But I think there's a lot going on here. And I would urge people, be very skeptical that you're hearing the whole truth on any of this, because we're in the prime season for manipulation, not just by foreign entities, which you would expect, but also by a lot of spin from the administration. So I think coherently about what the actual policy is and whether it's a good idea when you're thinking about these revelations.
So Uncle Les just came out for Spicy Monday. I hope everyone listened into this episode to hear that. Thank you, Les, warning us.
He's missing his tinfoil
maybe
hat.
Hopefully we can get a little bit. Martha, what do you think? The Biden administration, made a concerted effort to make this public news, right? Unlike the 2016 election, where we didn't really hear much from the government when it came to influence campaigns. You had the FBI announce it with ODNI and CISA to have a multi-agency announcement. Do we think that people making that decision, making that announcement public was wise? Are people going to be more vigilant? What do people think about election security in the next, as we move forward?
Well, I think to their credit, I think highlighting both the Russian and Iranian efforts to influence both campaigns, gives them some credibility with all voters. I would argue. I think in the past, the focus on the Russia collusion made a lot of Trump voters very skeptical of any language or talk about misinformation. I think they started to believe that this was equating misinformation with what they believed. And I think, by highlighting the fact that Iran is now trying to jockey in ways that would perhaps undermine a Trump campaign, because Trump policies are harder on Iran, highlights the fact that that Russia and Iran are trying to play Americans, both politicians and voters alike. They're also trying to undermine our trust in our system, a system that they criticize and they actively are working against. And so if they can succeed in undermining our trust in democracy, then they've won. So I think Americans, they have to be vigilant, but they also have to have faith in our democracy. And while there are gaps in our systems, overall, we actually have a very well-oiled machine, first of all, compared to other countries, and second of all, compared to what we had a few years ago.
Okay, that's a positive outlook. I'll take that. That's a wrap. Thanks so much to Devlin Burney, Claude Jennings, and the entire NSI team for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again on Wednesday, September 25th for another great episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're on YouTube, so grab your morning coffee and check us out there. And if you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.